In this video, we are going to talk about a very special keyword in Apex, which is called static. And you can use this keyword with your variables or methods in a class. And before I start talking about the static keyword, I just want to show you this example. I have a class called COVID-19, which tracks the recovery of corona patients. And it has two variables. First one is recovered in an area and the second one is recovered in country. And both of these integer variables are initialized with value 0. And then it also has a public method which is called treat patient. And whenever this method is called, we will increment the count of both our variables. So a very simple example, and I hope we could treat the corona patients this way. For now, let's execute this class and call this treat patient method from our developer console. And then we will talk about the static keyword, like what is the use of the static keyword and where we can use it. So first, let's declare an instance of our class. Let's call it maybe Jaipur. And then we'll use our new keyword to create a new instance of this class. And we can use simple debug statements to print the value of these two variables because both of these are public. Let's paste this once again, and this time we'll print the value of the second variable. And let's also add some text here. Recovered in area and then recovered in country. Let's execute this simple code and let's see what we get in our output. So both the values are 0, and if we call our treat patient method, these values should be incremented. So let's copy our class instance and let's call the treat patient method. And then let's print the value of both of these variables once again. And let's execute our code one more time. So this time the value of both the variables is 1 because our treat patient is incrementing both the variables. So what if I have multiple instances of this class, which is totally fine, right? Because I can track the corona movement in other areas as well, like maybe in Hyderabad. Let's comment here as Jaipur, both the places. And then let's create one more instance of this class. And we are going to call it Hyderabad. And on this instance as well, let's call our treat patient method so that we get one recovery in Hyderabad as well. And let's use our debug statement to print the values. And this time we are going to call it Hyderabad. And click on execute again. And we have got one recovery in Hyderabad as well. But this is incorrect, right? We have one recovery in Jaipur and we have one recovery in Hyderabad. But the countrywide recovery should be 2 because the total patient recovered in India is 2 now. One in Jaipur and one in Hyderabad. But we still get one in our output. How can we resolve it? How can we share one variable's value across all the instances? So that's where the static keyword comes in picture. So let's go back to our Apex class, and here on the second variable, which is recovered in country, we can make it static. And you need to define your static keyword before your data type statement. So now I just made my recovered in country a variable as static. And what this means is now this variable doesn't belong to a class instance, like it doesn't belong to Jaipur or Hyderabad. Now it belongs to the class itself. And without even creating the class instance, you can directly access the value of this variable. I'll show you a quick demo, but first let's save our code and run our code again here. And we have got an error and it says static field cannot be referenced from a non-static context. And the reason being, we are trying to access this variable which is recovered in country using our class instance, but our recovered in country variable is a static variable now. So we should access it directly by the class name, not with the class instance. As I said, these static variables belongs to the class and you can directly access this even without creating an instance. So you could simply use COVID-19 instead of Jaipur here and here as well and here as well. Oh, we were using Jaipur before as well, but this should be Hyderabad, right? Now let's execute our code once again. And you will see that initially the total recovered patient in Jaipur was 0 and total recovered patient in country was also 0. Then we have got one patient recovered in Jaipur and the countrywide count was also 1. Then there was one more patient recovered in Hyderabad and this made the country count as 2. So this how you can share one variable across all the instance of the class, or I would not use the instance word here because the static variable doesn't belongs to an instance of the class. They directly belong to the class itself. Or you can think of this static variable as global variable and its value is shared across your entire org. Now very similar to the static variable, you can also create static methods as well. So like you could simply make this method as static method and we can try to save this code, but let's see what happens. And we get an error and it says recovered in area variable is not defined or does not exist. But we do have our recovered in area variable right here. The reason why it gives us this error is this method belongs to the class now. And this first variable is not a static variable. So this means it will be null till the time we create an instance of the class like this. And if you don't create the instance, then this variable is null and your static method will never be able to access this variable. So that is why you can only use static variables within static methods. You cannot use your normal variables or non-static variables, I should call, within a static method. As soon as you remove this line or comment this line, you should be able to save your code, but this is not what we want, right? So let's remove the static keyword from here and we can create another method and we'll make that method as static method. Let's use our static keyword here. And remember, your static keyword comes after your access modifier. And if you remember our Apex methods video, where we talked about methods in detail, we discussed that the first keyword is access modifier. The second keyword is a special keyword, which can be either static or there's one more keyword, which is override, which we will explore later on. The third keyword is the return statement, then the method name, and after that the method parameters. So here in this method, let's make it like print treated. And here we'll simply print the value of our recovered in country field. We should be able to save this code as we are only using the static variable within the static method. But we are still getting some error and that's because of my spelling mistake. Let's save it again. So let's go back to our developer console and here instead of using this system.debug statement, let's comment it out everywhere. We are going to call our print treated method. And remember, it's a static method now, so you don't need a class instance or class object to call it. You can directly call it with the class name. And that's the beauty of static method and static variables. But you need to be very careful when to use it as the values of these variables is shared across your entire org. So whomsoever is using these variables, they'll always see the latest value. So be cautious when you are using static variables and methods. Let's copy this statement 2 more times and we can execute our code now. And we should see similar output. Perfect. So we have got 2 recovered in the country. And now, since we know about the static methods and we have already seen how we can call a static method, I'm gonna tell you one more thing. What do you think this debug method is? Is it a static method or not? Of course, it is a static method because we are directly calling it with the class name itself. We are not initializing this class with a new instance and calling our debug method. We are directly calling it with our class name itself. So there you go. Now we know that the debug method is a static method in Apex. Now, along with our static methods and static variables, we also have something called as static block, which looks like this. A simple block with curly braces and with a static keyword. And the purpose of this static block is you can use all your static variables within this. You can initialize those static variables some value here. And it doesn't matter how many instances of this class you will create, this static block will only be called once. So if you create a new instance like Jaipur and then another instance like Hyderabad, this particular piece of code will only be called once. So it won't be called again when you'll create your second instance, which is Hyderabad. From my personal experience, we rarely use the static block because we rarely come across a situation where you have to use a static block and initialize all your variables in a static block. Generally, you can easily get away with your static variables and static methods. You won't have to use the static blocks. So this is all in this video, and I hope you got the good gist of how the static methods and variables work in Apex and how the value of a static variable is shared across your entire org and how these methods and variables are tied to your class instead of the class instance.